Welcome to Women at Halftime podcast, but not just for women, for you men too. If you're at mid-career or the halftime of life, our inspirational topics are not only fun, but also meant to help you maximize and write your next chapter. Right here with me, Deborah Johnson. Hello, I am so excited to be here today with another wonderful guest, and it's even more wonderful because we share the same name. So first name, yes, first name at least. And, but I want to kind of remind everybody kind of what our mission is here. And with our Women at Halftime podcast, it's not just for women, but it is for those who at mid-career or halftime of life, which is officially over the age of 40, and you are asking what's next. You know, what is the next chapter looking like? And it could be the halftime of life. It could be the last third, or it could be even earlier than that. But that is what we are all about. And I love speaking to that subject and having guests on it. And as a reminder, make sure you're getting our newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And I'm going to say that slower because my husband always tells me to do this, but you will even get the article that goes along with today's interview, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And make sure you also look into some of our most recent books, which are the Women at Halftime and our summit. Have a new one coming out with Escaping Your Endless Roundabout. So look for that as well. So, well, without any further chit chat on my end, I'd like to welcome Deb Krier. And you go by Deb. I know you were.
I do.
Yes. So it's great to have you here today. And we are talking quite a bit about your journey with the big C, the big cancer, which people, you know, you're not fine yet you're perfectly fine with this. And you have quite a business background as well and communication background. But why did you start? I wanted you to give now a little bit of your background to enlighten our listeners on how you came across, you know, not even talking about this subject, but what a little bit of your background in a nutshell.
Sure. Well, you know, as you mentioned, I do have a background in communications. I have my own PR firm and, you know, have been doing that for over 20 years. It's great. But it was just doing fabulous with it. Have a podcast, which is how you and I met. Right. We really had a good time talking on the Business Power Hour. And then it was one of those things where almost 6 years ago, maybe 7, I don't know, I've lost track. You go in for your annual checkup and you have, the one of those fun tests. I had my mammogram and I was home a couple hours and I got the call. The one that, you all never, ever hope to get, but it's the very polite sounding person that's trying to not panic the living daylights out of you. And they just say, we need you to come back and retest. Well, my background before I started in all of this, originally, many years ago, I worked for an oncologist, which is a cancer specialist. And then I started my career in public relations with the American Cancer Society. So I tell people I know just enough to be dangerous about all of this, right? Because that was 30-ish years ago. And so I go back, I retest. We go through all sorts of different things. The original diagnosis, it was breast cancer, and the original diagnosis was stage 0. That's great. That basically means ain't going to cause a problem at all. Did some biopsies. Those came back negative. We thought, well, let's do, a little bit more in-depth test. That one came back a little bit different. And then the doctor said, hey, let's go in and actually remove some lymph nodes. She, at that point, was still expecting everything to be hunky-dory. And that we wouldn't have a problem. And, go in and discover that 8 of the 12 lymph nodes that were closest to this side, which is my left side, were positive. And so not only did I have cancer, it had already spread to the lymph nodes. Now we had done tests, but you got an itty bitty needle and, it's easy to miss. And so that kind of was, a little eye opening. Then, we go merrily along. We do a little bit more. And by that point, they actually said, hey, we want you to go see an oncologist. I had just been seeing the surgeon, things like that. And they said, okay, now it's time to go see the oncologist. And I want to take a step back. When the original mammogram came in, I did not have a lump, a bump, a tumor, any of those things like you normally have. I had what they call microcalcifications, which is grains of salt, even smaller than that. Actually, the computer saw it. It is something that many women over the age of 50, menopause-ish, get just because your body changes. And in a very rare instance, they do turn into cancer. And what they do is the little buggers start gathering together. And so it really was one of those things where if I had waited, it could have been certainly much worse. But yeah, that computer caught that there were those little speckly specks on there. So anyhow, I go to the oncologist and she's not a happy camper. She said, these could very easily be throughout your body as opposed to just in the breast area. And she said, so we're going to treat this pretty aggressively. So I had 8 different types of chemotherapy. It was an entertaining thing when I had those done. I had a port put in my shoulder, which is basically a little spigot. It's this nifty little thing. You can put stuff in it, take stuff out. So that works really well. And it's much easier than getting an IV every single time you need something. So, I had this big, massive dose of chemo. And I remember it was right before Halloween because of 2015, because kids came and trick-or-treated like 2 days after I had chemotherapy. I thought that was great. I felt fine. I went to the door. I was on and doing all that stuff. Then a couple days later, I felt a little bleh. But, I'd had 8 different chemo drugs. And so it was kind of natural that I was going to feel bleh. And, and like I said, I did know enough to be dangerous. But the important thing was I also knew enough that when something was not right, I knew that there was a problem. And so I had this extreme pain. I told my husband he called the fire department because we could not get me downstairs. And they, carted me off to the hospital. Luckily, we are 5 minutes from our hospital, and I remember it was funny. I'm in the ambulance, just, chatting away, right? Can you imagine that? I was just chatting away with the gentleman, and we're all kind of thinking this is not going to be a big deal. It's just some kind of weird chemo thing. And we stop. The ambulance stops, and I knew that we weren't close to the hospital yet. And so I said, "Why are we stopping?" And he said, "Well, stoplight." And I said, "How rude! I want to go lights and sirens." And that's the last thing I remember for hours.
Wow!
I went into septic shock.
Wow.
And so the pain that I had was sepsis that was forming. Wow. And then I went from sepsis to septic shock. And what had happened was one of those nasty chemo drugs. I got a very rare complication, happens in less than 1% of the time because I'm special. And it had literally eaten a hole through my colon, which is a really bad thing to happen, right? Luckily, my oncologist had unfortunately had someone die from that not real long before. And so she knew immediately what to order, all of those various things. And then we had this, great debate because, and I only remember bits and pieces of this. So I rely on my husband because I got very tachycardic. I mean, when you have septic shock, your body is going into overdrive and your organs are literally shutting down. Right. And so I was tachycardic. So my heart was just racing, plus I had a very high temperature, all sorts of things. So I was kind of in and out of consciousness. But I do remember somewhere along the line, my doctors arguing over how fast that day I was going to die. Wow. It wasn't, it was, and I remember thinking, excuse me?
Yes.
And so, convinced the surgeon to actually go in because he hadn't wanted to. I was a lost cause to him. So obviously it worked. But I was in the hospital then for about 7 weeks, in and out of ICU, lots of other complications. If it could go wrong, it did. And finally got home, and progressing. And then we decide, well, actually, I was in the hospital and I, just kind of casually told somebody, I said, that side, where I had the surgery, I said, that rib hurts. And they went, ooh. And so back in I go for another test, and the results were inconclusive. But basically the diagnosis was then stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. You don't get over that. That is not something that they consider curable. They do consider that it is something that can obviously go into remission, but it's always going to be there. And so that actually does mean a totally different type of treatment. So anyhow, finally go in, have a mastectomy. I opted for a double mastectomy because I didn't want to have to worry about it. And I'm old. I'm like, got a complication from that my surgeon had never seen, plunked me back in the hospital. Tried chemo again several months later, same thing. And so all of this just kind of kept going and kept going. So anyhow, long story short, obviously I'm still here. I've had over 30 surgical procedures. I am still taking treatment. I still have the port in my shoulder and was working with this absolutely fabulous woman. She is my business coach. We were working on something totally different. And she finally, we're on Zoom and she finally shakes her finger at me. And this was earlier this year. And she says, "There's more." And I went, "What?" and she said, "You did not go through everything you went through without using it to help other people." And so that is where trying not to die.live came from. It is this process of, it's obviously a passion project, and we'll talk a lot more about it, but that's where this came from.
Wow. I mean, what a story. Did I have any questions that you could not describe your, oh my goodness. And I'm remembering bringing back visions of my mother who had stage 4 and what she had gotten. She had gotten a staph infection, had the whole thing, the PIC and the whole thing, and almost died from that instead of just the cancer. And so you have that sort of same story of just, what you got.
A lot of times it's not the cancer that kills you. It's something else.
Right. And that's what we had found with her. And with others that have ended up getting that, the sepsis and all of the shock that your body goes in. So, well, let's talk about this. So you branded this this, "I'm fine. Oh, I'm just fine."
I'm fine.
Don't we say that a lot? "Oh, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just fine." That is kind of our standard answer. So how did this, we know now how it's kind of from your story, how it's become a little bit more personal to you, but how do you apply that in how you help others with this sort of "I'm fine"?
Right. Well, we actually have two, I am a marketing person at heart. So I have two markets that we are working with. One is with cancer patients, and helping them through this. We've got several resources that we have developed, and it's kind of a community. And I liken it to a tribe, and I have the word warrior tattooed on my arm, right where I see it, and I see it. It's in a place where I see it if I'm laying in a hospital bed, right? And that comes from very early on. I saw something that said, "Fate says to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm." And the warrior replies, "I am the storm." And, and so trying not to die.live is all about how we have to gather our tribe. And we're not alone. That is one of the things that having cancer really makes you feel, is that you're very alone. Even though there's lots of other people who have gone through it, it's still you, right? Nobody else is getting sick. Nobody else is losing their hair. All of these, nobody else is having all of these multiple surgeries and things like that. They're dealing with it because they are your support system, but they're not having it happen to them. And so that was, kind of what we were looking at, was how do you build your tribe? And as a patient, how do you make sure that you are the person in charge? Because that's really what it comes down to is, you have to be the person, you are that warrior. You are that person in charge of whatever you decide to do, with your treatment. And so we have that. We also, it's as part of that, we work with people who are those friends and loved ones who contact me and say, "My sister, my mother, my brother was just diagnosed. What do I do?" Wow. And so we help with all of that. And then the other side, and this is kind of the interesting side, and my oncologist has been telling me for years, you need to do this. I get people shake their finger at me a lot. And she said, you need to talk to physicians about how they can provide better support.
Wow.
So, when I was looking at it, what they call it is patient-centered care. And I tell people, in the real world, we call it customer service, right?
Right.
But it is about how physicians and, kind of everyone else in the medical community, how they're just part of the team. They're not the ones in charge, and things like that. But that is very much where the I'm fine comes in, because every time we go to a doctor, doesn't matter what we're going for, right? Deborah, how you doing? I'm fine.
That was so classic.
Right.
Yes.
You could be ready to die, or you could be ready to run a marathon. But the answer is, I'm fine. And so for physicians and any medical care provider, it's how do you get past that? And bless them. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the healers in my life. But they have to remain distant. I mean, no matter what they're treating, they have to kind of have that kind of distance, or they wouldn't survive.
Right.
But they still have to have empathy. And that's, that is kind of where the catch comes in, is they get so caught up in, I have to keep you at a stethoscope's length, that they never try and really get to know you and never get to know your family or your support system. And they don't answer all your questions. They just, well, I'm the doctor. You should do this. That's, I'm telling you to do this, and so that's really where the, I'm fine comes in, is frequently we're not. And how do you get past that?
That is so important. I mean, that was one of my mother's go-tos. It didn't matter how she was feeling. Mm-hmm. And she had fibromyalgia. She had all this pain and going through all of that she went through.
We don't want to be a bother.
I'm fine. I'm fine. And it's almost a generational thing that she was never able to get beyond that, because she was focused. Oh no, how are you doing? That was her focus. Right. And being able to educate people on how to start that conversation and how to express true feelings, very, very, very important. And so you've got some champions, as you have been. First of all, I want to say, you said this is a passion project. This is exactly what's next for many people. They're thinking,
what is your passion?
Yes. Where am I going? And hopefully they don't have to go through all of you've gone through.
Maybe it's a new job, a new career, all sorts of things. What is your passion?
Yeah, but this is the time of life, and look at how you are giving to others. And this is the time where we can give to others. And I'm asked often about, my podcast. Oh, how are you monetizing? I said, well, I am supporting my podcast. I don't have ads purposefully. Right. I'm able to promote, the things I have, which are a lot, but this is part of my passion on being able to help people. And you have done the same thing, not only with your podcast, but with your messaging and your emphasis of your new website, everything. I mean, all of that just takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of support. So I'm so excited and proud that you have gone, and gone forward, and how wonderful that you've had people in your life encouraging you. And so,
I would not have done it if it hadn't been for everybody else pushing, shoving, cajoling, arm twisting, all of those various things.
So who are some of those champions, as you would have called them, in your life? Or some of the people that have pushed you, or are there other people as well that you have really stood as, part of your, that you're standing on the shoulders of?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously there is family, and so, my husband could not have done this without him. That is obviously one of the things. And then, family members, things like that, and friends, that one of the things when I was so sick and in the hospital, I was almost never alone. My mom came out from Kansas. I had friends who were there. And so that was a blessing for the hospital staff too, because there was somebody in there helping take care of me. But, and the amazing thing was, people who I thought were going to be big support systems dropped off the face of the earth for whatever reason, couldn't deal with it, whatever. Okay. obviously it was time for the friendship to change. And then other people who I didn't even think knew I existed became some of my biggest supporters, whether it's in person or from afar, things like that. I mentioned my business coach, Kathleen Caldwell. She has just been absolutely phenomenal. Josh Zeppes. Now, I interviewed him on my podcast. And you know how it is when you're on a podcast, you just click sometimes with people. Hello, like you and I did. And so he is the brand archaeologist. He and I have spent hours developing the brand that is trying not to die.live. He has written the stories, he has created everything. And then of course, a great web developer and a great marketing partner in Brian Basilico. And, just people like that who really, and I told him, I said, you understand you're now part of the team forever. But I also made the decision because I can do all of that stuff myself.
Right.
But was I going to? No. So I hired it done. And I think that was one of the really important lessons that I learned through all of this was that it really did take the village to kind of build this, but having that accountability to someone else was what pushed me forward. I was paying them money. And so I darn well better get my act together and get it done. Plus I just knew that they were all such outstanding professionals that we were going to have a fabulous product.
That is really something when you hire somebody and you depend on them to, to finish the job.
Right.
And it also puts the accountability on your end to make sure they have everything they need, with my virtual assistant, with my web team, even though I do a lot of my own editing, but they're in the background, just change servers as we are recording this. And, there's certain things that I could do, but this is why they're my team.
Right.
That's in the next message. They said, we'll handle it. Well, that's great. It frees me up to do other things. Right. And so that's great as far as the champions. And it also brings up the point, and I've spoken about this quite a bit, that sometimes relationships change. Relationships with organizations change. You outgrow them or they're no longer meeting your needs. And so, your time is one of your most valuable resources. So that's really important. I'm feeling the cappuccino I just had. So I'm just, which I'm going to make everybody go, I want a cappuccino. So, but yeah, that's, I think that's a really important point, that it's okay. It's okay that those relationships.
And it's more importantly, it's okay to ask for help.
Yes.
And, and I think that as professionals, and especially if we're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, we assume that we have to do it all and know it all ourselves.
Right.
And we couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, I rely on a huge team of doctors. I would not watch a YouTube video and try and do some of the things that I do.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and same as, even if it's just something as simple as I'm not going to change the oil in my car by watching a YouTube video, we don't have a problem with outsourcing things like that. So as business people, we absolutely have to, and get that team of people who are really going to make sure that our passion projects go forward.
Right. Yes. It's, and it comes down to you being committed and then having the team. Yeah, definitely. And letting go of some things, which is really hard for me sometimes when you can do so much.
Where I'm like, that's not how I would do it.
But, I know, but
look, it looks even better. Right.
I know. Sometimes it really does, which is amazing. So, we had this little question. I had a couple little prompt questions here that I wanted to, I really feel like you've already answered this sort of question. Are you lost at sea? And what did you feel? You basically got beyond that. You said, no, I'm not going to be lost at sea at the beginning of this. I'm going to go on with life. Or do you have other thoughts on that? I mean, when we hear that big C word, it's like,
well, one of the things immediately, and I learned this 30 years ago with the American Cancer Society, was that, you, especially initially, you, if at all possible, have to take someone with you when you go to those first appointments. I was fortunate that I had my husband, because when you hear you have cancer, your brain goes, right? I mean, it just,
Yes.
And I tell people, you go to the doctor and you've got the flu, you come home and you go, when was I supposed to take that medicine?
Right, exactly.
And when you hear that you have cancer, your brain has absolutely no idea what to do, and so do your research in advance, write down your questions. Don't rely on the fact that you're going to remember what they are. But if at all possible, take someone with you. And I'm so glad that COVID has ended enough that people can now go with other people. I always felt so bad when I would be at my oncologist and they were in there alone.
Yes.
I mean, that was so hard, but yeah, in having that team initially, maybe it is just one person, maybe it's a friend. I mean, I offer to go with people, and I have gone with people to, to their appointments if they don't have that support system nearby. So, that is kind of one of those things that you can offer to do with people, is say, what do you need me to do? And it's not fun, but it is very much loved and appreciated.
And especially important for those who have aging parents,
right?
Because they don't hear the same things that you hear, and they don't ask the questions. My mom would have just kept saying, "Oh, I'm fine.
Yes.
Oh, I'm fine."
Oh, yes.
And there's, so my sisters and I, as we ushered our parents through that time, we were there. One of us was there.
Right.
And it was helpful. I have one that was more in the medical field. We always wanted her to.
I know, she spoke of that language, right?
Yes, the same language, but still we knew what questions to ask. And we gathered around to be able to do that, because it was so very important. And I think for us, as we go through our stages, as I watch, some of these older people, they're, now they're, not wanting anybody to, be around or whatever. I'm thinking, I'm probably going to be at that same place at some point. I guess I better warn our sons. They already know. They'll be firm. So yeah, but that's where we're all at with that. So
well, and the whole concept of the C is that you're just buffeted from everything, because not only do you have cancer, it's, can I keep working? How do I, what do I do with my family? All of these other things. And it's just this storm that keeps coming, and you have to figure out how to get through that.
Right. And that really leads us to how do you not die before you're dead? I mean, you have answered this in somewhat as, you want to keep working, you want to keep growing, you want all of this. And that's part of not dying. I mean, some people, they've not been diagnosed with cancer and they're still dying and they're still on their endless roundabout and they're not able to get off. They've so self-focused, or they're so they're stuck. So do you have any more to say on that?
We do get stuck, and because it's not in part because it's comfortable. Right.
Wow.
It's maybe it's that 9-to-5 job. You go in, you do your work, or you work from home now, but you do that because it's comfortable. You don't want to rock that boat on the sea, and so you don't get out, and when you have cancer, one of the things, or, any very serious illness, we do get so focused on trying to not die that we forget that we still have to live.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and the name came about because of my mother. It was when I was in the hospital, and some medical person came in, did something, left, and she made a face. My mother makes this face. I was like, what? And she said, you did not say thank you. And I said, oh, for God's sakes, I'm trying to not die.
What a great quote, Deb.
Yeah. And it was so funny because, the marketing person in me, again, was saying, okay, have to do a website. And so I go and I look, and tryingnottoDie.com was taken. How rude. Somebody else had this.
Yes.
I actually tried to buy it from them, and they said no. Or actually, they didn't say no. They just wanted a heck of a lot more money than I was going to pay.
Right.
And so, when you're looking, and this is something, branding is obviously very important to me, because, so I'm looking through the suggested things that I think it was on GoDaddy. Here are some other URLs you might consider. and trying not to die.live was
Oh,
available.
wow.
And I was like, fate. And so we actually made live an acronym. And so it has just really become part of that. And so it's, lead your tribe, invigorate your soul, voice your feelings, and elevate your mindset. That's
Wow.
Josh's work. That's the great Josh Zeppes.
That needs to be on every person's, they need a little card when they have their diagnosis.
Matter. Every single person, like you were saying, we all have got to remember to live.
To live. Yes. And we've gone through this stage of all the shutdowns and with everything else, and people are just not living. They're spinning.
We're scared.
Yes. Scared. And like, what's the next step? And do I really want to do that? I mean, again, you realize how short life can be all of a sudden.
Right.
We think when we're teenagers, we think, oh, we're going to live forever. And now, it just gets shorter and shorter here. So I love that. And how to really live, and especially with the .live, how nice. It's like you planned it.
It was fate, right? Yeah. And the other thing that I always like to tell people is, cancer doesn't have you, and so, keep working. I go in for treatments, all of these various things, and hospitals, they all have really good Wi-Fi. It's incredible how their Wi-Fi is.
Yes.
And there are many times where I am working and my clients never know. They just think I'm in my office and I'm working merrily along. And so that is one of the important things is, keep volunteering, keep working, all of those various things, because that is part of how we keep living.
Yes, you are so right. And, I never want to quit working. And
I know people say retire, and I'm like,
I know. Until my kids put me in a home at some point. So they'll probably say, Mom, it's enough. But hopefully I will be able to work all the way through my 80s. And I know many people have. I know people, musicians, I mean, they just continue working. I mean, maybe even who knows?
Mick Jagger's never dying. Some of these folks never dying.
And I mean, music is a part of still what in fact, I had the comment the other day, oh, it's nice that you're getting back and, doing more music. Because I still, I was doing some more engagements at Disney. And I said, I've never quit. I've just expanded my career, and I still have a lot of music out there, and I still do some performing and put things online. And of course,
music heals your soul.
It does. And I had friends going into music therapy, and I always thought, like, what is that? And I understand now more than ever because I've seen so much of it work. And how important that is for people, because it calms. And in fact, it's therapy for me as I sit most evenings then when I'm around, and I will do sight reading, and it immediately, I'm at my grand piano, I'm immediately calmed and focus, and it keeps my technique up. It keeps my skills. I don't want to lose that mental ability and all of that. So that's, we are living, and what a great example that is. Well, I want to get like one or two points of big advice that you would have for people that kind of summing this up. And I know I didn't ask this before, so now you have to think a little bit. But as we've talked, a lot of times I like to do that after we've had a conversation that you see, okay, what are the standouts here? That would really help people move along, whether or not they have just had that big C that hit them strongly.
The main thing is you are in charge. You are your warrior, and it is something to keep in mind is to always have those around you who support you. You're not the warrior off by yourself. You are the warrior that has a tribe of supporters around you, whether those are the caregivers, the healers, the elders, the sage, all of those different things that we have in tribes. We're never alone. And no matter what we're doing, starting a business, transitioning into other parts of our life, we need to gather those people around us. And it becomes very easy to not, especially during COVID, right? When we couldn't go out and about. And so now we need to get back to that, whether it's online, whether it's in person, all of those things. we have to remember that no matter where we are, we absolutely have to continue living every single day.
Oh, I just love that. One of the quotes my dad, and it's what I use in my speaking and in my messaging. And he said, I'm not afraid to die. I know where I'm going, but I really like living.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first found he was ill, we had 11 weeks with him. That was it. It was very, very sudden.
Mm-hmm.
But that I really like living. I want everyone hearing this today just to be able to apply that to your life. And because that is so important. And you are doing that right now, Deb. I mean, you are a living example that you have a smile on your face. And I know every day is not this pain-free place. And you have, what you're dealing with, still with that,
right.
that,
I have some pretty good pity parties.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, we all do, but
right.
You were able to get beyond those because, again, of your tribe and those around you. And as a reminder, that tribe can change slightly with network groups, with your organizations, with your friendships, the type of friends that you have, and not to discard the friends that have been in your life, but they may not be there for, all of the things that we go through. They might be afraid. They may not know what to say.
Yeah. And that's a big thing that I get is we don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I want to share this with you. A lot of people sent gifts and cards. Fabulous, fabulous. I mean, I still have everything, unless they were food, right? But, one person, again, who I didn't even think knew I existed, I get this teddy bear in the mail. And it's very clearly a handmade teddy bear.
Oh.
And more importantly, the note with it says, "My church choir prayed over this bear."
Wow. I mean, that is something.
I just got chills. I mean,
it gave me chills.
I mean, this person had no idea that I spent many, many years in a church choir.
Oh,
and I mean, and the fact that it was the choir and not my church, it was my choir prayed over it. And that bear has this very special place where none of my dogs and cats can get to it. Right. But yeah, I mean, that was just, but I still have all the cards that people sent. I don't know, at some point I should do something with them, but just those little things. And for the people who said, we don't know what to say, I told them Hallmark has cards.
Yes. And it's hard to know, what to do or what to say. And, but do something. And I sent a friend that had, a very tragic event in her life, and just sending a meal card, a gift certificate, because I knew she's probably not eating right. She's probably, these are things, the practical things, you can give somebody and give them the flexibility for that. And just to know that you're thinking about them. And those texts just that come in and say, I'm still thinking about you. How are you?
Right.
And so and the follow-up. And it reminds me that there's people in my life I still need to make sure I follow up on. Life gets busy.
Yeah. And we need to remember to do it now, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
You never know.
And so, I mean, it's just so important. And it really is, I tell people anytime I go in for, especially something that's more serious now, knock on wood, haven't had anything for several years. But there's always been this bubble that's around me, because it's all the people that I know that are thinking about me and praying for me and sending good thoughts and all of those. And so I'm never alone. And to me, that really was one of the biggest things, was knowing that, you're in there, and it is not a fun place when you're in that surgical suite and they got you strapped down and it's cold and but I was never, of course, I was like this too, right? Yuppie. I'm pretty sure they knocked me out just to shut me up. But, to know that I was not alone was just absolutely incredible.
Wow. That warms my heart. And it's because of who you are, Deb, that you have developed those relationships as well. And you've affirmed those relationships. So what's next for Deb Krier? I mean, what's next in your life?
Well, I tell people quite literally every day that I don't wake up and I'm not looking up at 6 feet of dirt, it's a good day.
Hey,
Such a deal. We are doing more things because we did just really launch Trying Not to Die.live. We did it in October. Just coincidentally happened to be Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but this is, for any type of illness, but, specifically cancer. And so we're just adding more to it, reaching out to physicians groups, figuring out how to, I live in Atlanta. So Emory is here, which is a huge teaching university, figuring out, how can I go down and give seminars, things like that. Virtual, works obviously very well to be able to do a lot of these things. When you're in, no matter what, you kind of have to, especially in my condition, you always have to, be aware of the fact that my immune system is a little wonkadoodle. But, so I still do prefer online. But yeah, just kind of seeing what's the next level with this. I'm creating an advisory board. Eventually, the big wish list is that we're able to provide retreats and things like that for people, and really be able to let them know that this is, we're part of their tribe too.
Right.
And so to be able to do things like that.
Wonderful. And of course, we can contact you through the website.
Yep. Trying not to die.live, not .com.
.live.
It does kind of throw people. We're so, we type .com, right? Yeah. Trying not to die.live.
Yes. And of course, your podcast as well, is your Business Power Hour. And we can get on your LinkedIn, because you will get those articles every week, and your podcast. So Deb, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you today. And I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I am so honored to be on your program. This was so much fun. I love it.
I love this format, the podcast format. It has opened up the world, and I just totally love it. So I want to remind everybody to make sure that you do get our newsletter, because you will get the article. It goes along with this podcast as well. goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And I have a number of websites, including Deborah Johnson Speaker, and also DJ Works Music. Everybody loves the music. Lots of sheet music out there, and musicals and everything else. So thanks again for joining us today, Deb, and for all of our audience. I will look forward to being with you again next time. And so bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show, and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.